So we're going to take this from the top here. There should be more passed around. I made 10. Okay, this comes from the year Tafshin Lamed Ches, 1978. And it was actually said, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, that the Rebbe's brother, Yisrael Ari Leib, is buried in Tzfat. And this actually, Maimer was said on his yurtzeit. He said it was yurtzeit, and because his yurtzeit is the 13th of Iyar, and then it goes right into Pesach Sheni. So in Tzfat, it's actually we have a special, he's ordered us an arousal towards these inyan in Pesach Sheni, because it's connection with the Rebbe's brother as the day before. Talk about that another time, perhaps. So let's jump in. Lahavin inyan Pesach Sheni. What is this concept, Pesach Sheni? You don't have a copy?
So listen.
There's no more? There's 10 copies, I mean.
No, just 10 more.
Mevar Admar Tzemach Tzedek by Maimar or Divrei Maschil Zeh. The Tzemach Tzedek explains in a mimer that he has with the same name. The Inyan Pesach Sheni Yuvan Al Pi Shlosha Hakdamos. You can understand Pesach Sheni by first having 3 prefaces. So one preface is not enough in this case. You have to preface 3 concepts in order to understand Pesach Sheni. Hakdama Aleph is the hefresh between Chodesh Rishon and Chodesh Hasheni ba'avodas ha'adam. What is the difference between the first month Nisan and the second month Iyar in avoda? Right? What do they represent in? Like we said in the class the other day, everything exists in what's called Olam Shana Nefesh. Right? In these 3 dimensions of space, time, and soul. So in soul, in other words, what is the first month? Even though the first month is in time, Brian, that's awesome. The first month is in time, right? But everything that's in time is also in space. Everything in time and space is also in soul. So what does it mean, Nisan and Iyar, in our soul? The Chodesh Nisan, is there another copy by any chance?
There is in that stack.
What's that? Okay, let me share with the rabbi. So, a better turnout than I thought. Sorry, next time I'll make more, Baruch Hashem. So he said, B'chodesh Nisan, shenekuda bo, hi yetzias Mitzrayim. Right? In the month of Nisan, the point of it obviously is the going out of Mitzrayim. And what is this in Avoda? This is the Avoda of Sur Meirah, turning from evil. Running out of Mitzrayim is basically getting away from the evil inside of you. Mitzrayim is not getting any better, right? They didn't go and heal Mitzrayim. The idea of Mitzrayim is just an evil thing they had to run away from. So in our own avoda, the idea is that there's something there which is very strong and dangerous in you, and the avoda is to get away from it, to run away from your negative passions, your negative attributes. This is the avoda of Nisan inside of a person, which is the whole year long, by the way, right? But it's especially now, then, in Nisan, L'tzeis livroach ma'ara. It's called going and fleeing from the evil, and in a word we call this iskafia. Right? Iskafia, the Aramaic word for subjugation. Subjugating the bad that's inside of you and sort of running away from it. That's Nisan. The avoda of Chodesh Iyar. The inyanu hamiyuchad shel Chodesh zeh, shebo hu nivdel mishar chadashim. So the uniqueness of this month, which separates it from all the other months and gives it its special quality, is what? Every single day of this month has its own mitzvah. We said that for bringing yesterday, right? There's no other month like that.
This month?
This month, every single day has a mitzvah. And we're going to learn the sikha together, not to give away all the punchlines at once, but there's something very unique about the mitzvah that's associated with every one of these days of this month, more than the mitzvahs that are associated with other days on the calendar. In other words, the mitzvah of every day of Iyar is uniquely bound up with every day of Iyar, more than other mitzvahs are bound up with the day that they do them on. For example, you eat matzah on the 15th of Nisan, so there's a connection between the 15th of Nisan and matzah, but it's not nearly as deep as the connection of the mitzvah that's done on Rosh Chodesh Iyar and Beis Iyar. Why? What's unique about the connection between the day you do the mitzvah in and the day itself in the month of Iyar? Who could think of that? It's kind of a deep one, but I've had students guess right on this one.
Yeah, I'm finding the same question.
Yeah.
There's a connection between the day that you do the mitzvah and the mitzvah. And that's true about every mitzvah that it has a certain time. Rosh Hashanah, you blow a shofar.
Right.
You don't blow a shofar the next day.
Right.
So there's a unique connection between the shofar and the first day of Tishrei.
That's not their money.
But the thing is, there's an even deeper, more intimate connection with the mitzvahs of the month of Iyar and the day you do them on. Even then, let's say Rosh Hashanah, you blow the shofar, matzah, you eat matzah on the 15th of Nisan. There's something, a deeper intrinsic connection. What is it? You understand the question, at least? Counting the Yom. Wow, I'm sorry you have to be back there. You want to sit at the table? You're sitting with the rabbi. You guys are like looking good back there.
We've got your back.
A couple of kohanim. I don't know what to do here. Wait, so what does that have to do with counting the Omer? Yes.
Iyar is the only month that is completely all
Full with mitzvahs in every day.
It's all Sfirat Omer, right?
Every single day on mitzvah,
Yes,
but still it didn't answer the question. So what? So there's only one day of the year you eat matzah as a mitzvah. Only one day of the year you blow a shofar as a mitzvah. Why is there a deeper connection with the days of Sfira and their mitzvah than shofar and its mitzvah and its day? Because last chance.
Well, it's every day of the
What's
month.
that?
You said that's the whole point you bring it up. Is it's every day of the month, not just some days.
The idea is like this: when you were doing the mitzvah of the month of Iyar, and quite frankly, it has to do with all the spheres of Omer. The mitzvah is to count the day. The mitzvah is to count the day. Think about that. The mitzvah of the 15th of Nisan has nothing to do with the 15th of Nisan. It just happens to fall out then, and therefore you superimpose matzah on that day. But it has nothing to do with the time of that day. Whereas the month of Iyar, or all the spheres of Omer, you're doing a mitzvah with the day. The mitzvah is that you count this day. So you make a mitzvah. It's much an unbelievable time. This is, in a lot of ways, the Rebbe says this month is greater than every other month. He says that pretty much every month, but this month you got to know why, right? Because there is literally nothing like this. There's no other, and that's why it's specifically Iyar and not Nisan or Sivan, where you also have Sfiras Omer dipping into Nisan and Sivan, but not the full month. Which means that every single day of this month, if you do the mitzvah you're supposed to do with it, you've not just done a mitzvah every day, you've done a mitzvah out of the day. Which means the entire day, the 24-hour period of time, you used it like an esrog. When you use an esrog, you don't throw the esrog away. It's sanctified. It's that you've imbued it with the or ein sof, atzmus mahus, like it's connected with mamish, the essence of God. There's no other thing we do like this. With time itself becomes totally sanctified because the mitzvah is with the day. Right? You have every mitzvah has what's called the chefza and the gavra. The person doing the mitzvah, the thing you do the mitzvah with. In this case, the thing you're doing the mitzvah with is the day itself. And so therefore there's a deep-seated connection with the mitzvah and the day it's done with. And so therefore it's connected to what we're saying here. Because what's unique about the Chodesh Iyar, in which every day you do a mitzvah, and it's different from every other month, in that every day it has a special mitzvah, Sfiras Omer, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down, after the brackets and the parentheses. Hi avodah Sfiras Omer she'inyanehu birur hamidos va'afichasam l'kedusha. Is hapcha. This is the concept, therefore, of what we call refining the midos and furthermore transforming them into kedusha. Right? You take the day itself and you transform a mundane moment of reality and you turn it into a mitzvah. So the whole concept of, in general, the Sfiras Omer, what are we doing all the time? We're working on our animal soul. Each day we go through another sphera, which is another aspect of our personality, and we're doing it hayom yom, or hayom shnei yamim, hayom shlosha yamim. Basically, when we say hayom, we're drawing down light. That's what hayom represents, day. And we're drawing down light onto that particular sphera, and so we're charging that aspect of our personality with light. And so it's the idea of transformation, or his hapcha. So that's it. Yet Nisan and Iyar is equivalent to his skafi and his hapcha, which is subjugation and transformation. וזהו מה שכתוב באחד לחודש השני, לצאצא מארץ מצרים. And that's why it says on the first day of the second month, hey, that's today, לצאצא מארץ מצרים, of their gesund, of their going out of Mitzrayim. Right, so it's called the first day of the second month of their going out of Mitzrayim. Seemingly, why does the Torah have to unite the second month with their going out of Mitzrayim? We're out of Mitzrayim in the first month. But it says in the Torah that we're in the second month of our going out of Mitzrayim, which the avodah, the rishon of these, because it turns out there's two levels of coming out of Mitzrayim. There's the first month of coming out of Mitzrayim, and there's the second month of coming out of Mitzrayim. So the avodah harishona, the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the first service of going out of Mitzrayim, Chodesh Harishon, is Hiskaf Sitra Achra, is our work of subjugating, pressing, and running away from the Sitra Achra. Then you come to a second tier of your work by transforming the darkness, Avodah Shniya B'Yetzias Mitzrayim, and that's called Chodesh Hashem, which basically it's called the second month of coming out of Mitzrayim, because it's the second tier of this process of running away from your evil. You then start to transform it, and this is called the second month. So this is these 2 months in Avodas Hashem, what they represent in our basically daily service. That's the first Hakdama, the first preface. Everyone follows along? Okay. Hakdama base. The second preface is the Chiluk ben Shnei Chadashim Eilu binyan Hasfiros. What is the difference between these two things as they correspond to the Sfirot? Right? The first month and the second month are united with different Sfiros. Chodesh Harishon is Malchus. The first month is associated with Malchus, Nisan. Sfir Yishona Milamata Lamaila. That's what we talked about in the Mimer. That it says, Pasach Hashem ala Pesach. Hashem jumped on the door, over the doorposts, right? And the door represents the sphere of Malchus. It's basically the doorway into Atzilus. Nosson, cheer up. What's wrong? Mm-hmm. If you're not smiling, I can't really go on, man. You're like a ball of happiness, usually. Okay. So the first month is then connected with Malchus, which is the first sphera. How is Malchus the first sphera? It's the last sphera. It's the first sphera from below to above. The Chodesh Hasheni hu b'Yesod. Therefore, the second month you're climbing up. The second month is connected with Yesod, the second sphera from below to above. Sphera Hashniya. So welcome to the month of Yesod, this month of Iyar. Today's Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so this is the 2 months in Spheros. Now Tzemach Tzedek explains the Shnei Hakdamos. That's it. That's the second Hakdama. It's shorter than the first one. The Shnei Hakdamos Elu. These two prefaces, which is what in Yanim Shal Nisan ve'Iyar ba'avodas ha'Adam, the concept of Nisan and Iyar as in Avoda, and in Yanim b'Spheros, and their connection with their Spheros. Shaychim zeh lezeh. These two prefaces are connected with each other. This is one of my favorite Maimarim, actually. It's one of the reasons I love to do this Maimar, because he gets into these concepts in that Maimar. There's a Maimar in Torah Or about Yosef and his brothers, and the dream of Yosef, where it says that in his dream he says, behold, and we were gathering sheaves in the field. And in this Maimar, it discusses that the Birur Sha'adei Shvatim, that there's 2 levels of, so to speak, refinement of the sparks. Right? What's the story with the sheep gathering sheaves in the field? How is that connected with refinement of the sparks? So he goes over there and he explains that what do you do when you gather sheaves? I've never actually gathered sheaves, but I'm sure it's fun. When you gather sheaves, you basically take individual stalks and you put them into bundles, and then you put those bundles into bigger bundles, and you wind up essentially making oneness out of separation. I think we learned the Mimer together at some point, not too long ago. So this idea of his dream was really indicative of the whole pathway of the Jewish people, that we're going around the world making achdus and unity out of the plurality of the broken world. So we're going around, and it says they were doing their avodah in the field. What does the field represent? The field represents Malchus, the source of the world. Right, and essentially, this is the process of the birurim, of the refinement of this and the elevation of the sparks. But he says there that after the end of the day, that all the tribes were going around gathering the sparks. At the end, the sheaves, the bundles of the tribes, they bowed down to Yosef's sheaf. Right? What is it? sheath.
No,
Sheath?
A sheath is where you put a sword. It's a sheath.
It's a sheath.
The V sound.
Is it a
You rarely say a single sheave, so I'm with you on that.
Right? Yeah. It's weird
A sheave. I'm not really buying it, but okay, sheave it is. What's that?
I think it's a sheaf.
It's a sheaf?
Oh, sheaf with an F sound?
I think so.
Sheaf.
One
Maybe.
with an F at the end.
Yeah,
That
sheaf.
makes sense.
So the men with V instead of an F.
Betzalel, good of you to join us, man. There's room at the table. Okay, so the point is that this mimer, therefore, speaks about the difference between the avoda of the Shvatim, of the other tribes, and Yosef, in that they're doing a certain type of refinement, which is that they could refine it to a certain point. They could make a bunch of bundles, which was in itself pretty special because they made individual sheaves and they made them into one big bundle, but they were still stuck with their bundles. In other words, they couldn't undo it from any type of division altogether because each one only brought, at the end of the day, they still had 12 bundles. But then their bundles bowed down to Yosef's bundle. This was this concept of something that was way beyond the pale of regular refinement. They were able to make all the bundles as it were into one. Sort of similar to Yaakov Avinu when he slept on the rock and all the rocks were like the 12 tribes. They all became one rock. It's a similar idea. And so over there he speaks about what we call the work of the tribes, the Shvatim, was called Birur Rishon, the first level of refinement process. And what we say over there is Hurak Bitul Hayesh. The first Birur, of course we all go through, we have these two levels in ourselves, but the first refinement, the first go at it of making one out of many is called the Birur Rishon, which is a level called Bitul Hayesh. What is Bitul Hayesh? It's easiest to understand Bitul Hayesh in conjunction with its counterpart, which is called Bitul, what? Hametzias. Right? Bitul Hayesh and Bitul Hametzias. What's the difference between them? So I kind of just spoke about it a little bit. Bitul Hayesh means that you still have a yesh when it's all said and done. In other words, you're a self, you feel yourself, you're aware of your own drives and motivations, and you've not really gone out of your own sense of self-importance, but you do this tremendous act of putting yourself on the side and making his will your will. So at the end of the day, it's Kabbalah soul. We call this hiskafia. This is what hiskafia is. Subjugating yourself means even though you have a self and your self wants to do something else, you subjugate it and you make it do what it doesn't want to do, rather what God wants it to do. Like getting up in time for class, right? Every one of us would rather sleep in. But we know that then we're going to do what we need to do as opposed to what we want to do. And that's a tremendous avoda. It's called the Bitul Hayesh. And it's called the Birur Rishon. Why is it called the Birur Rishon, the first refinement? Because it only gets to a certain point, right? Meaning to say that there's a certain limitation on our part. What would we like to do in a perfect world? We'd like to make it that our actual interest was to get up. Not just that we were going against our own passions and our own desires, right? But wouldn't it be great if you jumped out of bed like that? You woke the dawn and you couldn't wait to jump out of bed and run to every mitzvah and run to every responsibility that you had, like your life depended on it, like you were running after something pleasurable. So that would be like a level we call Bitul B'Metzias, the second level. Bitul B'Metzias is that your whole Metzias, in other words, your whole you is no longer you. You negate it entirely, and in the place where you once were, God's wishes are there, and God's will is there. It's like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? You open your mouth, and God speaks out of your mouth because you've negated yourself and you've nullified yourself to the truth on such a high level that you sort of like shed the snakeskin of your animal passions, and all that's left of you is your godly soul, which is essentially Him. It's not you. So you've negated yourself. You haven't just put yourself on the side, you've transformed yourself into a godly entity. So that's called the second level refinement. And this is what we're saying, that when the Birur Rishon is called Bitul Hayesh, which is like hiskafia, right? That's just what is it called? Subjugating yourself. And that's the work of the tribes. Now, why is it the tribes I'm bringing a little bit from that other member because it's just a nice one. Why is it that the tribes are only able to do the Bittul HaYesh? And the Birush Agdei Yosef Atzadik, whereas the refinement that Yosef does, which we're saying is Bechinas Yesod, which we'll explain in a second. He represents the Yesod, the second Sphira up. That's called Birush Sheni. That's a second level refinement. Hushia Nichlal Be'elokus. That means you become totally included into godliness. You no longer have private, selfish desires. And that's called Bittul B'Metzias. This is a total self-negation, which Dugmas his Hapcha, total transformation. Now, why is it that the level of the Shvatim are associated with Malchus? They can only do the Bittul HaYesh. And the level of Yosef, Aaron, you go come back? Yes. The level of Yosef is the level of Yesod, and it's Bittul B'Metzias. What does Malchus have to do with one level of Bittul, and Yesod has to do with the second level of Bittul? What's the connection between these two things?
So Yosef was the unifying aspect. So until it came to Yosef, they were all separate until Yosef.
Why is that?
Because they were all the bundles were separate until King Yosef and they started buying down, and there was an aspect.
But why couldn't the tribes do what Yosef did?
Malchus is separate. It's a separate
And what's the connection with the tribes and Malchus?
Strictness.
What's the connection with Yosef and Yesod?
Yesod is higher.
Yesod is definitely higher, right? But why is Yosef associated with Yesod and the tribes are connected with Malchus? Right?
What is Yesod stand for again?
Yesod is a sphera called foundation.
Foundation.
It's because Yosef was Tzadikim Yesod Olam.
Tzadik Yesod Olam. Yosef HaTzadik, he represents Yesod. Yeah, there's different places we learned that he was Yesod.
Is it just because he founded the people, the Jewish people?
He didn't really found the Jewish people, right? He wasn't one of the Avos.
He was 12.
But the idea is like this. It says, Eila Toldus Yaakov Yosef, right? In other words, there was a uniqueness, right? Yosef was the chosen son. He was like the preferred son. And it wasn't just because he, was a pretty boy. He was essentially the greatest tzaddik. In other words, he was higher level soul and a higher level tzaddik than all of his brothers. So much so that they had a completely different source in Atzilus. They all came from Atzilus, but from totally different levels. The Shvatim, in general, we say they were the 12 tribes. They come from the 12 diagonal lines of Atzilus. We talked about this a little bit on Shvi Shel Pesach that night, if you were up and zochet to be at that session there. But it's the idea is that in Atzilus, you have spheros and lines, like every world. You have 10 spheros, you have 22 lines that connect them. Right? Of the 22 lines that connect them, 10 of the lines are horizontal or vertical, and 12 of the lines are diagonal lines that connect them. These 12 diagonal lines are unique in that they actually are the source in Atzilus for Biyah, for the lower worlds. Why the 12 diagonal lines of Atzilus is basically in Atzilus itself. You have the source of time and space and all creation. Before it actually pops out and becomes the Bria, it's sitting in potential as these 12 diagonal lines. Do you remember why we said the 12 diagonal lines? Because everything in time and space is divided into 12 somehow. First of all, you have the calendar, right? It's an obvious one. There's 12 hours in a day, there's 12 months in a year, for whatever reason. Time is divided into 12. Space is also divided into 12. There's 12 constellations that the celestial bodies go around in circles around these 12 constellations. Why 12? It's really bizarre. It's only because Hashem created the world like this. And if you really want to know the inner reason why there's those 12 lines, it's because there's 12 ways of permeating the name of Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. There's 12 different combinations. The name Yud Kei Vav Kei means to be. And so being can be divided intrinsically into 12 parts. And therefore everything we see in the being is implicitly divided into 12 parts. That's time. Space as well. Because every object basically has up, down, north, south, east, and west, which is 6 directions, the 6 midos. And each one of these 6 midos has basically 2 diagonal lines which define its length, width, and curvature. Right? So if you take like the top of a cube, however, the two diagonal lines which join the two corners together, whatever they're shaped as is going to be the length and the width and the curvature of the cube. So it defines space and time. Now these 12 diagonal lines is also in Kedusha the source of the tribes, the 12 tribes. Because Hashem basically sent the 12 tribes into the world to sanctify the 12 hours of the day, the 12 months of the year, the 12 constellations, the 12 sides of an object. We're here as like a superimposition of holiness to uplift the world. And therefore Hashem sort of made us in the same shape that the world is in. So just like the world has these 12 attributes, so to Kedusha was sent down with the 12 attributes of the 12 tribes. But then there's something called Yosef. And actually not just Yosef, you have actually Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yosef, David, and who did I say? Moshe and Aaron. Right? So some people are such divine revelations in their being that they're not just one of the 12 lines of this that are connecting the Spheros and Atzilus. They're a Sphera themselves. They're actually a Sphera. And there's mamish no comparison whatsoever to a Sphera to the lines. And I'll give you like sort of a metaphor for this. What do the lines represent? There's 22 lines. And there's 10 Spheros. What do the lines represent? The letters. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So what are these? Now, what are the 10 Spheros represent?
Utterances.
Huh?
Utterances from which the letters are derived.
Not really.
Of Hashem.
What's that?
Aspect of Hashem.
Yes, like we, so to speak, have mind and heart. We have 10 Spheros. And then we have letters that shoot out of these Spheros to try to express in some minuscule way what my emotion is or what my intelligence is. And the letters are, everyone knows that you can't compare a few letters that come out of your mouth to your faculty of emotion that's producing these letters. I mean, you can't even compare much like night and day. So too is the difference between the lines which connect the Spheros and the Spheros themselves. The Spheros themselves are like God. The lines that come out of him are the letters that Hashem speaks. That's all. Expression. So the difference between Yosef and the other tribes is unspeakable. He's on a completely different level. He's actually a Sphera. He's a part of Elokus. They are just the source of creation inside of Atzilus, who then actually gets spoken out, and the world of Bria, therefore, is basically designed in this way, where you see the tribes go around in the 4 camps, right? The camps that surrounded the Mishkan, and they walked in formation in the desert, and each camp had 3 tribes in it. So it's basically 4 times 3. This is like sort of the shape of the tribes as they get spit out, or spoken out, I should say, into the world of Bria. But just they have a source in Atzilus. Now here's the point. Their source is in Malchus of Atzilus. Why Malchus of Atzilus? Malchus is the mouth. Malchus peh Torah shabal peh karyonla. Right? Malchus represents the mouth of Hashem. So these 12 lines, really their source is that they come out of Hashem's mouth. So that if you're going to trace them back to where they are in Atzilus, their main presence in Atzilus is in Malchus of Atzilus. They don't really go higher than that, because that's where letters derive from in the source. So therefore, if they're going to do that was all like a preface to understand the content. If they're going to now do their refinement process, which means what? We said they were sent to this world to make the 12 aspects of the world holy and elevated, right? Which means they're going to try and bring the notion of 12, which is space and time, back to its source, where its source is in Atzilus, where it's godly. When Hashem speaks it out, it becomes creation. That's cool and all, but creation is separate from Hashem. So the work of the tribe is to remind the creation that it comes from Atzilus, that the 12 aspects of time and space are really 12 diagonal lines of Atzilus. And so the work of the tribes is to go around putting all the sheaves together and basically redesign the world into its archetypal 12 lines. And that's what those 12 bundles represented. They brought the world back to its source in Atzilus. But what level of Atzilus? Only Malchus of Atzilus. Because that's where they came from. They can't bring it higher than their own level. Yeah, you following any of this?
Enough.
Anyone have questions at this point?
Together,
What's that?
what the bundles coming together
Represents the tribes doing their work of bringing the world from a state of total chaos into like a pristine level of 12, aspects. Because that's like showing that the source of the world comes to the 12 lines of Atzilus. So they brought the world back to its godly source.
Is that
Is that like elevating the sparks
Mm-hmm.
when they bring them together?
Absolutely. You're elevating the sparks, rejoining the sparks to their source, which is in God's world, which is Atzilus. Right? The sparks fall into the world of creation. They no longer look like God. They look like a tree. They look like a cornfield. Right? And all of a sudden, a Jew goes around and does his thing with them, and he basically brings them into a God, a godly perspective. And then all of a sudden, you can see that the world is not a world. The world is 12 bundles of godliness, which is basically the 12 tribes. But there's a limitation to that because they can only bring it to their own source in godliness. They can't go above their source. And their source in godliness is where? Malchus of Atzilus. That's where they come from. So the highest and best thing they can do with this world is bring it to Malchus of Atzilus and no higher. What's the problem with that? The problem with that, Donnie, 1 second. You have a question, yeah? The problem with that is as follows. In Malchus of Atzilus itself, albeit it's a godly world, but it's the aspect of God who's planning on making the worlds, who's planning on speaking the worlds into existence. So within God, yes, it's a godly world, but it is a world nonetheless. Because God, in his own sense of self, has in mind, I want to make a world. And that's like somewhat of a creation within divinity. So while it's a high thing, it's better than a creation outside of divinity, to be sure, but it's still not negating the world purely out of existence and going to a point of pure godliness. No world. Don't forget, the word world means helam. Olam is helam, which means concealment. So even inside of Atzilus, if there's a world in Atzilus itself, it's still some level of concealment. Because it's just a world that's godly, as opposed to pure godliness. So the Shvatim, they did the first level of the refinement. They brought the world to as high as they possibly could. They made it a godly world, but they couldn't make it oist world. They couldn't make it not be a world. For that, they needed Yosef HaTzadik. Why Yosef? Because Yosef was not a line. Yosef was not one of the 12 lines. He was not in Atzilus itself. Yosef didn't come from the aspect of Atzilus, which was the source of the worlds. He came from the aspect of Atzilus, which is Yesod of Atzilus, Hashem's own self, which is beyond creation. And therefore their sheaves bow down to his sheaf. This was like a level of total self-nullity. It's like what we say, like a chassid is going to go out on shlichus. And he's going to do whatever he can, find the guy, teach him Torah, show him a little tefillin, and so he's going to bring him to the Rebbe. When this guy sees the Rebbe, what the Rebbe is going to do to this guy, this shliach in a million years couldn't do to this guy. Right? Because the Rebbe comes from a different place. He's able to take that same little spark, which the shliach brought to however high he could. The Rebbe now swallows it and brings it into the place of the Rebbe. It negates it entirely. And that's called bittul b'metzias. You take the person to the next level. So we need Yosef to read it. Yosef is like the quintessential Rebbe, right? He was the Rebbe of all the other people, of all the other. He was the tzaddik, yeah, right. He was the Rebbe of all the other shvatim. They didn't like it, by the way. They fought it bitterly against it. They tried to kill him, in fact. But at the end, they had to recognize he was the Rebbe, and he negated them, and he fed them, and he sustained them, and so forth and so on. So this is the level of Yesod, Tzaddik Yesod Olam, right? And this is the idea of what we call the Birur Sheni, the second level of refinement, which is not just iskafia and subjugating the worldliness and bringing it sort of closer to the God, but transformation and turning the world mamash into God. You bring it up beyond Malchus, where Malchus recognizes that it's godly, but it recognizes the world. You bring it up beyond Malchus. Beyond Malchus, there's no worlds anymore. It precedes the worlds. And therefore you turn the world straight into Elokus. And this is what it means. Their sheaves, which were still 12, bowed down to his and became negated to the one. Donnie, you had a question?
Yeah, we said that the source for the tribes were those lines connecting the spheres, but why do we say Malchus?
Because Malchus is the place where the speech comes from. So yeah, you're right. They're up there in Atzilus in these lines. It's kind of like if I would say that you have a whole sentence brewing inside of your emotion. That's very true. You have words hidden inside of your emotions, but until you actually speak, they don't actually have a real presence there. They only sort of show up when you want to communicate your emotion. When the emotion's happening, you're just feeling. Even though it's filled with letters, those letters are like negated inside of the overriding feeling that you're having. So they're like diagonal lines, so to speak. They're there, but they're not really there. They're only there in a source. When they actually come out, it's when you're preparing to say them. Or even before you actually say them, right? Because Bria is the actual speech. But even when you're preparing to say them, sort of organize your emotions into concrete letters, that means you've drawn the potential letters out of your emotion and you've prepared them for speech. And that's like the Surah of Malchus, the source of the worlds inside of Atzilus.
So you said that every line is represented by a letter. There's 22 lines, 22 letters. And so there's the 11 Shvatim because Yosef is not associated with lines. Does that mean that?
No, there's actually 12 because you have Yosef kind of divided into two.
Oh.
Right? If you count all the tribes together, there's actually 13.
Right.
Although he does mention in that mimer that Yosef, if you want to say, he's also a line and he's also a sphira. Why? Because Yosef, the tzaddik, also does the job that we do. In other words, he can also go around collecting sheaves. It's just that he can do the second thing, which is like negating them out of existence. We can't do that. We need him for that. But if you want to say that there's 12 lines and he's one of them, that's also okay because he does both jobs.
So do we know like the names and the association of each line with each?
The royal we, it is known. I'm not sure if I can rattle it off for you right now, but yeah, that is known.
And they have like each one has a meaning, a letter, and associated with the Shvat.
That's right, and it's connected to two particular spheros, which like define. Yeah, it's amazing. It's like mamish. It's like deep psychology. If you really want, these are like the archetypical like forms inside of the shadow. That drive not only Jewish consciousness but all consciousness. There's certain Reuven was in the south and Yehuda was in the east. Yeah.
It's like
it's like there's certain aspects of it. I mean, if you really wanted to study this and get into it, it's a whole knowing of self in the deepest way, the godly self.
It's like one of those documentaries about the brain where they like zoom in and you see all the neurons like firing around like crazy.
Yeah.
It's like,
It looks like Israel, the different territories or the
You have a certain piece of land, and your land has certain qualities to it, and grows certain things. It's near the sea, or it's near the mountains. All this, it's like part of your inner makeup.
So you say Yosef was both a line and the Sphira. So is it possible to be a Sphira without the prerequisite of being a line?
Yeah. I mean, the Avos, for example, were not lines at all. They were just
They were
spheres.
not lines at all. Okay. And then this dynamic of the Rebbe being Yesod and everybody else being Malchus, is this a model for general kingship, or is this only in certain situations that it was like this?
No, this is a generational carry down. It's always like this.
So like Mashiach will be Yesod to the rest of our Malchus.
Mashiach, I don't know where. I mean, it could be that it goes higher and higher in terms of like their ability to negate. I mean, Yosef was awesome, but there's going to be even greater tzaddikim theoretically as you go through history, right? Mashiach. I mean, there was Moshe that came after him, etc. But I'm just saying that the principle stays the same. That there's a Jew who represents sort of the tzaddik of the generation, whatever it is, who all of the ability for everything else in the generation, its ability to really go to where it has to go, happens through him. He's the conduit. That's why we have these examples throughout the Torah.
So who are the other spheres? The Avos and Yosef's four, right?
You have Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and Yosef, and then you have Adam and Chava up there in the Mochin.
But how come Yosef, if Yosef is Yesod and Moshe and Aaron and Nitzach and Hod, how come Yosef's after them?
Listen, it's not lav dafka the after and before. First of all, you can go from below to above and everything, but it's what it's not a historical.
It's not chronological.
It's not chronological.
When they showed up in history, the structure is a structure.
Exactly.
Do we have time in Atzilus anyway? Do we have this concept of linearity? This happens and then that happens.
There is not time, but there is sequence.
Sequence.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, we're getting there. So all that was from this mimer from the Alter Rebbe, where he's trying to explain. Let's just focus ourselves, right? We said that there's 3 introductions before we can understand Pesach Sheni. The first one was ניסנ and Iyar as they are in Avodas Hashem, and we said that's Hiskafi and Hishapcha, subjugation and transformation. Then we said there's a second preface, which is that you have Malchus and Yesod ניסנ is Malchus, and ER is Yesod. And then we said, those two, we didn't get to the third one, but those two are connected with each other. Why? Because essentially, the ability to have hiskafia, right, which represents stage one in the process of refinement, that's connected with the Sphira of Malchus, which is the month of Nisan. Why the Sphira of Malchus? Because Malchus only, if you're operating from a position of Malchus, the best you can do in your work of refinement is to have iskafia. You can't have transformation if the place you're coming from to use your power of that you're endowed with is from Malchus. You can't do transformation. You can only do subjugation. Why? Because Malchus recognizes the existence of the worlds. It can't undo the worlds. It can't transform worlds into godliness. It's the source of worlds. The best thing it can do is subdue the bad part of the world and make it look like a godly world. So therefore you see that the Hiskafia, which is the Indian of Nisan, is associated with Malchus, the other second Indian of Nisan. And then to finish the concept, then you have ER, which is Hishapcha, transformation, because that's connected with Yesod. It enables you to do the second level of the refinement, which is not just to subjugate the world, but to turn the world into godliness, because you now are endowed with the power of Yesod, which is beyond the source of the worlds. And so these two things go together. Nisan is Hiskafia and therefore Malchus. ER is Hishapcha and therefore Yesod. And that's like the idea of the tribes and Yosef he throws in there. Right? Everyone understands this? Yeah? It's pretty exciting stuff. Okay, so that's that. Now, 4 lines from the bottom, Hakdama Gimel, the third preface that we need to know. And that is the Indian of Pesach, Pesach Melashon Dilug V'Kfitza. The word Pesach means to jump. Rashi says, Hu Hamshachad Nailis B'Yoser She'eni Yechon Lavo B'derech Ishtalshlus V'rak B'derech Dilug K'mavur V'Lekutei Torah. So what does it mean to jump? And why did Hashem have to jump? So it's actually, I said a mimer on my birthday. It's very connected with them. Everything winds up being connected to the mimer you say on your birthday at the end of the day, if you do it right. But he says, what is the idea of jumping? Is jumping represents a drawing forth from God that comes from a very, very high place, which is not able to come through a way of ishtalshlus, only through a way of jumping. Explain that. Why you have to jump in order to access something so high? Why can't I walk my way there? What's the problem? Walking means going step by step through each sphera, right? Jumping means, I guess, to jump over a bunch of spheras. Why is it that I can't take the highest levels of revelation and walk them down the pike? I have to jump down the pike in order to get them.
It's like they can't handle this. If you're in a rush and you've got to walk down every single step, you'd rather just jump down all the stairs. Maybe the Siddur Shtashlut couldn't handle that type of force.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. In other words, because one of two reasons, right? It couldn't handle it. In other words, let's say I'm trying to take something which is from the heights and heights of heaven, basically, the Orein Sov, Atzmos, whatever you want to talk about, and I want to bring it down and send it down into the lower worlds. And that's what it says, Pasach Hashem ala Pesach, right? Hashem jumped on the door. We said before the door was Malchus, which means Hashem brought all the way down into Malchus a very high level of revelation. He struck the firstborn. This is considered Kvodo v'atzmo, it says. It's his very honor and his essence. And it says he had to jump down there. Why? Because this is the difference what we call Derech Mavar and Derech Hislabshus. You ever heard of these two concepts? These are like things that you have to know, just like Hiskafi and Hishapcha. There's certain technology, terminologies you have to know. What's the difference between Mavar and Hislabshus? Let's look at the words. Mavar means to pass through. That's also what it says, Avarti Be'eretz Mitzrayim. I passed through Eretz Mitzrayim, it says in the Pasuk. And Hislabshus comes to the word Levush. It means to enclose. So the problem is, if you're going to bring such a high level of divinity, and you're going to put it into lower spheres in a way of what's called enclosure, which means you're going to wrap the limitations of that sphera around that light that's coming down. So one of two things are going to happen. Either the light is going to be so strong it's going to just explode the limitations of the sphere that it's trying to come down into, right? It's like you're saying, like you just fall down the stairs. Basically, you're not going to make it because it's just too much force and energy trying to walk down little stairs. You're going 100 miles an hour, you hit a staircase, you're just going to trip and fall. You can't basically put that much energy into these spheros. You're going to knock. It's not going to make it to the bottom before it just undoes the sphera. Or it's going to wind up. You're going to slow down and you're going to start walking down the stairs. What did you accomplish? You slowed down. You lost all your juice. You lost the power of the intensity because you had to go fit it into a sphera. Then it's nothing. Then it's nothing like it's nothing special. You're just going the regular plan, the Seder Ishtalshelus, because the sphera limited and minimized the force of such a high place. So the only way you can do it, therefore, hislavshus, in clothing yourself into the sphera won't work. You have to do it in a way which is called derech mavar, or pesach, a la pesach. You have to jump. Jumping does not mean you skip a step, actually. You don't actually skip the steps.
You just turn them from the steps into a slide. So you can
Right. You basically go through all the spheros, but in a way that the sphere doesn't grab onto it. It just passes through it and uses it as a medium where it doesn't really translate itself to the contours of that particular sphere. It just zooms through it and it gets to the bottom. Like an escalator. Yeah, perfect. Like an escalator. Right? And so this is what we call Pesach in general. The concept of Pesach is the third introduction. Is that to know that if you want to get a really, really high level revelation, it can't come down in a way of Hishtalshelus, walking down for one or the two reasons that we just mentioned, but rather it has to jump. Good to see you, Ephraim. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. It's great to see you. Okay. So, Mevur Ba'amayim, the Tzemach Tzedek explains in this matter, 2 lines from the bottom. To mizeh move on, from here it's understood, Shagam in Yanu Shal Pesach Sheni Hu Dilug. So if Pesach means to jump, then guess what? We know something about our holiday that we're working on. Pesach Sheni also must mean to jump. Hamshachash l'mayla mishtalshlus. Pesach Sheni represents there's something coming down, which is from above the ishtalshlus, above the whole order of the worlds. V'achiluk bein Pesach Rishon u Pesach Sheni hu. So what's the difference between the first Pesach and the second Pesach then? Ba'makom u ba'inyin shebo nimsheches hamshachazu. All right, if you're jumping, so you're jumping. Why do I have a Pesach Sheni and a Pesach Rishon? Because there's a difference between two things. The jump is different in two things. One, the place you're jumping to, the place, right? So I'm jumping. I can jump to any place, right? So the idea is a Pesach Sheni means it's a second jump. So the idea is I'm jumping into a different place. I.e., where was I jumping on Pesach Rishon? Pasach Hashem ala Pesach, which is Malchus. And where am I going to jump in the second jump? I'm going to jump to Yesod. So that's the makom. I'm jumping to a different place. Secondly, it's also a different in Indian. Meaning what? That Malchus and Yesod represent different things spiritually. So you're not only jumping to a different place, it's almost like sort of just more geographical. You're jumping to a different. You're accessing that level of jump and that high light above the Seder Ishtalshelus into a different aspect of your personality. You're experiencing and you're wielding that level of such a high light into a different aspect of yourself. Not just to a different like technical sphera on the chart, but each sphere represents a different aspect of you. And so therefore you're accessing the jumping light into a unique aspect of your personality in Pesach Sheni. The Pesach Rishon Kasiv Pesach Hashem ala Pesach, as we said. In the first Pesach he jumped on the door. And that we said that represents Malchus. Sham Shachash B'derech Dilug U Pesach Haiseh Pesach Spheros HaMalchus. So what does it mean to jump into Malchus? What does Malchus represent? B'nefesh ha'adam, in our soul, as we said, like in the notion of Avodas Hashem, what does Malchus represent? Yira Tata. It represents the lower fear. We're going to have to get a little bit into this tomorrow to do it properly. But in other words, I'm not sure if everyone's aware that there's 4 stages in the Seder Ishtalshelus, right? What are they? Chochma, Bina, the Midos, and Malchus. Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei. So you take the whole 10 spheres, you can divide it into 4 parts. In those 4 parts, there's also something called love and fear. But there's the lower love and the higher love, and there's a lower fear and the higher fear. And those four things are also planted onto the chart of Yud K Vav K inside the spheres. Chochma, Bina, the Midos, and Malchus. So what is it? Chochma is the higher fear. Bina is the higher love. The Midos is the lower love. And Malchus is the lower fear. Did you get any of that?
Lower fear?
Malchus represents the lower fear. So it's basically like a love sandwich. You go fear, if you're going from below to above, the lower fear, love, the higher fear.
The clap sound.
So what is the love again?
It's your love of God. We're just learning about
what's the Sephirah? What is it?
Yesod, or all Yesod, and all the six Spheros represent the lower love. Bina represents the higher love. And Chochma represents the higher fear. We have like a little simon in the pasuk. It says, "Eila told us Yitzchak ben Avram holidas Yitzchak." Right? You ever remember this? It's in Parshas Toldos. It says these are the offspring of Yitzchak. Yitzchak is what? Fear or love? Fear, right? Yitzchak is Gevura. So these are Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram is love. And then it turns around and says, seemingly extraneously, Avram begot Yitzchak. So it says Yitzchak, Avram, Yitzchak, right in a row. And that's like, so it's supposed to be a hint for us that there's this idea of fear, love, fear. Now that being said, did everyone follow that?
What's the highest fear? Keter?
No, Chochma. That being said, we see that Malchus is called the lower fear. And we can explain tomorrow what is the lower fear, what is the higher fear, how do these things actually manifest themselves. But in short, so we can finish this couple lines, the Malchus is called the lower fear. So when there's Pasach Hashem ala Pesach, when Hashem jumps onto the door, and we said the door represents Malchus, it means he's invigorating ourselves. We're getting invigorated by this light, which is above the Seder Ishtalshalus, into the region of ourselves called Malchus, which is into our fear of God. That what happened to a person on Pesach? Something happened, just like Purim, right? Something happens. Especially if you're in the game deeply, is that you get all of a sudden you're reinvigorated from above. And where does the reinvigoration take place? Specifically in your fear of God. The Malchus of yourself, your low level fear, basically your ability to just say like I don't want bad in my life. I'm going to run from bad. I pashat fear God. That is suddenly charged with a level of above the Seder Ishtalshalus. That's when Hashem jumped on the door. Zeh Shar Hashem, right? And the lower fear is called the gateway to God, because if you don't have basic fear of God, you can't go anywhere else. It's the first rung on the ladder. And this is the shoresh of Surah Meirah. When you have this fear, you now have the ability to turn from evil. You're going to run from bad things. When you don't have really fear of God, you're going to get schlepped into the negative thing. Suddenly you eat your matzah, you go through Pesach, you do it right, and you don't know where it came from, but you're running away from evil. You suddenly have a new power of Surah Meirah. And what happens Pesach Sheni? The second jump, which means the jump above the Seder Ishtalshalus goes to a different place and a different inyan. It goes into Yesod. In the soul, Yesod is connection to Hashem in love. And so therefore, when it comes to Pesach Sheni, and the month of Iyar in general, Pesach Sheni, we get an reinvigoration, and a jump from the Seder Ishtalshalus. A second round, it's now jumping into our love of God. In other words, we are infused from above, not with a fear of God, with a love of God, because it jumped not to Malchus, but to Yesod, and Yesod represents the lower love. Enabling us to transform our midos into Kedusha. When you're just running away from God, it's good, you're having Iskafia. But when you're loving God, it means you turn your interests into His interests. Right? Like we said before, that's like Bittul B'Metzias. So what happens to a person Pesach Sheni is it gives you the ability to mamish love God like that's what you love. Your love of God has become you. It's been invigorated with a new truth to it. So you don't have to just run away from the bad things. You can run towards the good things in a real and meaningful way. That's Pesach Sheni. Okay, we'll hold here. You want to turn this off somehow? You know how to turn this off? Thanks.
Can I text you right now?
Yeah.